We're in a series. It's called Faith at the Movies. And it's a two-part series. Last week we looked at the movie Lightyear, came out on Disney+. And then this week we're looking at the movie Rise of Gru. And we're looking to see what faith connections do we see. Because if we look through whatever we see in our culture through eyes of faith, then things that, even if they're a little upside down, we can also say, and yet we can even see God's grace through that. And as we're in this series, it's also a series based on whatever movie our kids were watching the Wednesday before. And so I said, okay, this is the movie they're watching. Now I've got to come up with a sermon about it. And it's amazing the doors that open up. In this movie, Rise of Gru, it's one of the Minions movies. If you're familiar with the Minions, then you might already know about Gru, who is the despicable character. He grew up in the 70s, I believe, and this movie follows him growing up at that time. The adults who were in the room during the movie really enjoyed the music because they said, I know these songs. This is great. Gru grew up in the 70s, and he wants to grow up. He has, this question. My daughter even told me this week what she wants to be when she grows up. I'm guessing it'll change a few more times. But she told me. But in this, Gru was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? His class is asking him, his teacher's asking, and he says, I want to be a supervillain. And that just gives you the sense of who this character is. From the beginning, he is wanting to be the greatest supervillain in the world. And for whatever reason, he has minions. He has people to do his bidding. You could call them henchmen. But they are a goofy kind of minion. They're these little yellow dudes who do his bidding, but very poorly. They mess up almost everything he asks them to do. It's hilarious. They are great comic relief. And one of the minions is named Otto. Otto is a particularly annoying, talkative minion. You know the person, you're going to have them in your mind in a moment, that when they talk, they don't realize no one is listening. And they don't realize that they've been talking for 20 minutes and didn't breathe so someone else could get a word in. You have their face in your mind right now. Everyone has these people. And this is Otto. He stands up, he gives so many grandstand speeches. And in this movie, Gru, the supervillain, he's a kid. He's 12, maybe 11. And he steals what's called the Zodiac Stone. It has special powers. And he does it to impress the really great supervillains. Have you ever thought about the things that we give up, the things that we trade when we try to impress others? Have you ever paused to think about, if you look at the story of your life, at the times that you were trying to impress someone else, what you are trading in, even if you succeeded? Those times that you thought, I'll be good enough if they think I'm good enough. The way it sends you on a path that you didn't want to go down. And it causes you to think things about yourself that aren't even true. And it may take years to even unravel all the lies that get spun around when you try and live according to someone else's expectations. Well, Gru isn't the only one to make a bad trade. In the scripture we just read, Isaac, the son of Abraham, prayed to the Lord for his wife, since she was unable to have children. The Lord was moved by his prayer, and his wife, Rebekah, became pregnant. But the boys pushed against each other inside of her, and she said, if this is what it's like, why did it happen to me? So she went and asked the Lord. From the beginning, these two in her womb were opposed to each other. Isn't that fascinating? From the beginning, even in the room, they were wrestling. Maybe they were just kicking a lot. But it appears they were wrestling. And here's the Lord's answer. The two nations are in your womb. Two different peoples will emerge from your body. One people will be stronger than the other. And here's a twist. The older is going to serve the younger. It's the opposite of the ordinary way, not just for our time. We all talk about firstborn syndrome, right? But then, especially at that time, it was the opposite. It was, without any doubt, the oldest is in charge. The youngest is second line. From the time they're kids, even through adulthood. In that time, that's the way their world worked. It's kind of funny to talk to twins who are born. And not every twin set does this, but I hear a lot of twins talk about who's older and who's younger. And it's only by a handful of minutes. And yet, it's a big deal. It matters. It's always fascinating to listen to them. I'm thinking of one particular set of twins right now. They got into the biggest arguments, and it was such a big deal for them. Well, so they're opposite of each other in that way, that the older is usually in charge of the younger. And here, there's this prophecy. Not necessarily saying God's causing this, but to say, here's what God already foreknows. The younger is going to be in charge. Well, they came out different in that sense, but also the first came out red all over, clothed with hair and shield. His mom names him Esau. Esau means red. Immediately afterwards, his brother came out gripping onto his heel. Could you just imagine that? She named him Jacob. And their dad, Isaac, was 60 years old when they were born. And they were opposite of each other in a lot of other ways. When the young men grew up, Esau became an outdoorsman who knew how to hunt, and Jacob became a quiet man who stayed at home. They were two different people. If I look at people's families, when I talk to people, I find out almost everyone comes from dysfunction in one way or another. One way or another, that when they start putting together their family story, as I meet with people in counseling, as we're just in conversation, I say, oh yeah, I see why that felt kind of messed up to you. Oh yeah, those people, they don't talk anymore. Oh, and you know what? As I hear more, oh, and you have an uncle that doesn't talk to this person anymore either. It passes on generationally. It seems like most people, in one way or another, when they look at their family story, they say something's not quite the way it should be. And that's not shocking. If we look at the biblical story of how God created this whole world and created it good, and then there was a fall, a place where we stopped trusting God. We said we're all going to do things our own way. The story is they ate the apple they were told not to, which goes a whole lot beyond eating an apple you're not supposed to. It's much more of saying we're not going to trust what God says about the way I live. And it's spread throughout creation to the point that everyone does things their own way. It's the fall of humanity. So it's not surprising that even among people who know Jesus, there be some places that are mixed up and upside down. But some of us have more dysfunction in their families than others. And I think Isaac and Rebecca and their family, they might have experienced a little bit more of this. This verse here is telling. It's subtle, but it says a lot. Isaac loved Esau. We can forget about the whys. Isaac loved Esau. Rebecca loved Jacob. That's an interesting thing to grow up knowing one of your parents loves you, the other parent loves the other one, especially if you're twins. Well, many people cope with dysfunction by seeking alternative sources of meaning. They find ways of adapting. And I wonder how much of that rivalry that their parents put on them actually was part of the cause of their rivalry between each other. I'm just wondering. Well, there's this one time, the scripture tells us, that Jacob was boiling stew, and Esau came in from the field. He was hunting, right? I guess he didn't catch anything. And he was hungry. And you know, we make dumb choices when we're hungry. Raise your hand if you've made a dumb choice. Raise your hand if you've been hungry while you made a dumb choice. Uh-huh. They say you shouldn't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. The irony is, though, this is just a side note, they also say that if you're eating while you're grocery shopping, you'll buy more because it triggers your sensors to know, oh, I need to get more food. That's why Costco gives those delicious free samples. It's a tool. They also say don't make decisions when you're tired, right? That's why they say you shouldn't have your smartphone open when you're tired because you're going to make dumb decisions. That's when that moment is going on where you're tired. It's the end of the day. You say, oh, I just need to relax. So you pull out your phone. You start scrolling through whatever app you use. You start playing stupid, mindless games. You start reading emails. And then you realize, how much time have I been doing this? Well, in this moment, Esau was tired. Esau was hungry. And he says to his brother Jacob, I'm starving. Let me devour some of this red stuff, the stew that he was making. Well, it was a terrible trade. Jacob says, okay, I'll give you some stew. But here's what I want to exchange. You're the firstborn, right? You have this birthright from being the firstborn. I want it. You have the stew. It's all yours. I want the birthright. Now, a birthright, there's a lot involved in that. There's an inheritance. There's a double portion. You know, you take your family's assets, right? And I think current thinking today is that if there's an inheritance, the parents split, you know, they have $5 left, they have 5 kids, they split $1 to each one, right? No. Not at that time. The thinking was the firstborn gets a double portion. They're going to get $2. Everyone else gets 1, right? But then it goes beyond that, because remember that promise that God gave to Abraham? Through your offspring, I'm going to change the whole world. And it went further. Your children are going to be more than the sand on the seashore, more than the stars in the sky. I'm going to make you into a great nation. And that gets passed on through this blessing from one generation to the next to that person who has that birthright. That's the way that the thinking went. That's the way that they're describing it in Genesis. And we know, when we look at the story, this is why it's so important. If you open up the book of Matthew, it's the first book, or the first gospel where it begins. If someone says, oh, I'm going to start reading the stories of Jesus, I'm going to open up the first gospel, the first of the stories of Jesus. They open up the first chapter and they're confused and bored. It has this long genealogy of everyone leading up to Jesus, which is really boring for you and I as American Western people that say, get to the point already, get to the story. But for people reading it then, it was really important to say, no, Jesus is that end of the line, linking all the way back to Abraham. That promise God made to Abraham, through your offspring, I'm going to save the whole world. I'm going to make everything right. I'm going to spread a blessing bigger than what's wrong here in this world. It's so important then to say, Jesus is that link up to Abraham. And if we look in that story, Jacob is in that lineage. Esau is not. Well, we make dumb choices when we're tired. And Esau says, what good is a birthright to me? I'm going to die anyway. Is Esau, though, going to die with no stew? He might feel hungry. You know, sometimes your hunger can be so much, you feel like you have to have that slice of pizza. You have to have that brownie. You can't resist. You need a sandwich right now or else. That was one of the Esau moments. He wasn't going to die, but he made a decision. Jacob, he's a smart cookie. He says, I want to make sure this is official. I wonder if he'd made this trade with Esau before. And Esau says, I never wrote it down. Well, Jacob says, give me your word. Don't just say you're going to do it. Give me your word. Let's make a pledge. Let's make this official. And he did. And so Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. So Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate, drank, got up, and left, showing just how little he thought of his birthright. In a lot of translations, the word that's translated for just how little he thought of his birthright, it's often translated as he despised his birthright. Do you have a birthright? Do you have gifts that God's given to you that you're tempted to trade in? Do you have something that simply for being alive in this world, or even better, because you're a child of God, that you could live into and experience, but you've traded it away? I'm thinking of the gifts and opportunities that God has given you. The opportunity to live in joy each day. We have a choice when we wake up in the morning of how we're going to perceive the day. Are we going to live in joy, or are we going to live in fear? Are we going to hold on to grudges, or are we going to move forward? Are we going to hold on to what we've lost when we can't get back? Are we going to step forward into something new, knowing that we do miss what we've lost? And I want to pause here for a moment and just clarify what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that when you're grieving a loss, that you have to force yourself to get over it the next day. I'm not saying that at all. I'm telling you, if you're experiencing a loss, you will be carrying this loss with you for years to come. Not for every loss. You lose a quarter, you move on, right? But the losses that have value, you're just going to carry them with you every day. That's just part of it. That's part of the journey. And would you want it to be any different? Because the truth is, if you could just get over it, then that means you didn't really have something to lose. So you'll carry it with you every day, and yet you have that choice. Will you still move forward and live into this new life or not? I know one person who's had a loss. What they've told me is, I have two lives. I have the life I lived before the loss, and it was a wonderful life. And I have my life now, and it's also a wonderful life. They're different lives. But sometimes, in grief, sometimes by not processing through your grief, I've talked to people who remain stuck and unable to live that new life for a long time. And they traded in the opportunity to live a new life because they are stuck, missing what they don't have anymore. The biblical book of Jeremiah tells the story of the people of God, the whole nation who lost everything. And they were given a promise in the book of Jeremiah. It's one you may have heard at a graduation event. Jeremiah 29:11. In this context, God says to them, I know the plans that I have in mind for you, declares the Lord. They are plans for peace, not disaster, to give you a future filled with hope. But they can't seize that future if they won't move into that future. And that's the context of the story, is God saying, so now move into it. They just lost everything. And God's saying, take the step. How many times have we each gotten stuck in our journeys? I have. And how many other trades have we made where we traded in a gift from God and we lost it? Moments that you had to spend with your kids or your grandkids. But you missed the moment. You were scrolling through your phone. You had the opportunity to see your nieces or nephews. And you could have had so much joy there. But you had something else on your mind. And you didn't find a way to let go of it. You had the opportunity to enjoy an evening with your spouse. But you had something else going on that felt important at the time. And you need time. Time. You know how many hours you get a week? 168 hours. It feels like a lot till you realize you're sleeping or eating for most of it. We get 168 hours a week. It's a gift. How do we use it? How do we take that time to sleep and really rest so we can be awake and alive and enjoy the moments that we get awake? You have a birthright. In the movie, Gru gives that zodiac stone to the annoying minion Otto for safekeeping. And Otto, he says, okay, I've got to take this back to our secret lair, who's in the basement under Gru's bedroom. And he has to get it back. He faces all these obstacles to get through town, to get the zodiac stone back to the secret hideout. He has to go through wet concrete and all this crazy stuff. He finally he gets really close. He overcomes them all. But then he sees something. And then he sees a pet rock. I don't know if any of you have ever had a pet rock, but there's a birthday party. In the movie, the box looks a lot like that. And someone is so excited about their birthday gift, they go to open this big box present, and they tear it open, and they reach inside, and they pull out a rock. And this rock has googly eyes, super glued on. And Otto the minion falls in love. He has to be with this rock. All the romantic music is playing in the background. Oh, I want to be with the rock. And you know what he does? He runs inside the house. The little girl, she was disappointed with her pet rock. She says, I want this. But he runs inside. He says, here, I'll give you this zodiac stone. You give me the rock. We'll make the trade. And he does. He runs home, sees Gru and the other minions in their lair. They're celebrating because they have the zodiac stone. And he says, oh wait, where's Otto? He gets there. He says, look, I have the stone. This is going to be so good. It's a terrible trade. Otto despised the zodiac stone. Not that he hated it, but he didn't give it the value that it deserved in the framework of the movie. In the process, he broke Gru's trust, not just in him, but in all the minions. He fires them all in that moment. If you want to know what happens next, you have to watch the movie. But what trades do you regret making? Like Otto, who at that moment, he regrets trading in that zodiac stone. What trades? Some of them are one-time trades. Some of them are repeated trades. Why do we make these trades? Some of them, they've just become habits. They become everyday trades that it's time to make a change. It's time to change the habit. I used to hear it takes 27 days to make a change in a habit. Now I hear it takes 40. I don't know which is true, but here's what I do know. It starts with the first day. It starts with the first day to change a habit. What are the habits that are causing trades for you where you don't get to have the life you want? If you look through the routines you just carry day after day, if you think of, here's what I always do in that place, what could be different? What compulsions do you carry? We all have compulsions. What are some of the things that you just feel compelled to do in that moment and you realize, I don't have to live up to that person's expectations anymore. I don't have to stress about being perfect. I don't have to worry about this thing that keeps driving me. And the fears. What are the fears that are driving some of our worst traits? These fears of not having enough. These fears of not being enough. Earlier you heard the song, I am no longer a slave to fear. Say it with me. I am a child of God. You can make a different choice today. Everything we have is a gift from God. From God. God made you. God is with you. God's blessed you so much. And God gives you these gifts. Why? Because he loves you. Because he loves you incredibly. And then he makes you a steward, a caretaker of these gifts. What a steward does is takes care of these gifts on behalf of someone else. They're given to us in part because God loves us, but also because God trusts us with them. Gru, who wants to be the greatest supervillain in the world, he trusts Otto with the Zodiac Stone and says, don't lose it. Get it back to where it needs to go. God gives you everything you have, 168 hours a week. God gives you everything you have, every dime you earn. God gives you all of your family and friends and connections, each person, a gift from God. And God says, I want you to enjoy this. This is a gift. And also, I want you to take care of it. Don't bury it in a hole in the ground. I want you to use it for my purposes here on earth. My plan is to make this world better through you. Care for your family's needs. Don't waste it. Care for your family's needs, their real needs. And care for other people. Support causes that care for other people. Look out for people beyond your own household too. That's something I think we lost as a society in the year 2020. We started just looking internally as a culture and not seeing one another. And join God's mission of sharing the good news of Jesus. Do it with your words. Do it with your actions. Do it with the way you reach out to people and say, do you have a church? But also do it with your finances. God says, I give you all of these blessings. I ask that you commit a percentage of it back to me. In what way do you and I know I'm guilty of it, in what way do we waste, throw away God's gifts? How do we waste the treasure and time and talents that God gives us? Can we just confess our bad trades to God? Can we admit them? Or are we going to be like Otto who says, no, but look, it has googly eyes. What do you do when you realize that you've made a bad trade? You could sulk and just feel guilty. Sometimes when people sulk, though, they're not feeling guilty, they're feeling ashamed. Shame doesn't actually help us move forward. Guilt sometimes makes us say, oh, I could do that differently. Shame says, no, I'm just a person that messes things up. We could try and justify that choice. No, really, it was a good deal. I needed another one of the gadgets. Or we could do something about it. Sometimes you can't regain what was lost. You can't just go back in time. There are consequences to choices that can't be undone. That's true for all of us. But we can make different choices in the future. We could say, today's the day I'm making that next step forward. Otto, that's what he does. He says, I am going to face every obstacle to regain the Zodiac Stone. He figures out who has it because the little girl gives it away. And he hops on a tricycle. And he races and races and races on that tricycle all the way through the desert. It's a kid's movie. To find it. What might you have to do to regain what you've lost? To prevent yourself from making some of the same bad trades in the future? Jesus says, if your right eye causes you to sin, then tear it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than all of it. If your right hand causes you to sin, chop it off. throw it away. It's better that you lose one part of your body than the whole thing. And he's using hyperbole here, right? This is exaggeration. None of you should go home and get out your axe and take off your arm. None of you. But do you get the point? If there's a habit, there's a practice that's taken life from you, if there's a way of thinking that's taking life from you, then change it. Eliminate it. Talk to your small group about it. I know that's scary. Maybe you don't want to tell your whole group about this habit you have that you don't know how to change, but you want to change. But pick 2 people who you trust, who will go on this journey with you. Maybe it's something that you know you need someone, not just someone from your group, but you need someone who has professional experience. Contact a counselor. There's lots of good counselors. Set up an appointment. If you need help finding a counselor, talk to me. If you want just a couple conversations, we can do this together. But if you need a professional counselor, I can give you a referral. I've got some people that I know can help. What blessings have you given up not getting the support you needed to make a change sooner? Do you despise the trade enough to change your path? You received some rocks today when you came in. And you can imagine it here with googly eyes. When you hold it in your hand, you received a rock. You're going to do something with it in a moment. I know some of you put them in your purse. You have to dig them out. That's okay. I put mine in my pocket because I would lose them in my purse. But can you look at this rock? Acknowledge what it represents. It's just a pet rock. And it's all the things that you've gained in exchange for things that really have value. This rock doesn't have value. Can you put one thing? Gosh, it would be overwhelming to think of all of our bad trades. Can you think of one? One bad trade that you've made. Mine involves my time. Can you think of one bad trade that you've made that you say, you know what? I can give that up. I can give up that pet rock and see if I can take steps forward into something else. I'm going to invite you now. Once you have it, we'll say a prayer together, and then would you take your rock forward and place it in the bowl? God, you see our pet rocks, and these are things we valued and treasured so much. And the truth is, we've despised the gifts that you've given us and traded them in for pet rocks. But today we're giving up our pet rock. Today we're even despising our pet rock. Because we want to step into the new thing you have for us or regain the old thing that we've lost. We want to take the opportunities you give us today. So today we give up our pet rocks and we trust in you to fill the hole they leave behind. In Jesus' name, amen. Would you bring your pet rock and place it in the cup as your array?